An Introduction to Musubi and How to Study It. Our textbook series is entitled Musubi, but it's not the musubi you may be thinking of. Musubi comes from the Japanese verb musubu, meaning to tie, knot, bind, link, join, or connect. As it happens, just after we began our new curriculum and released our textbook, the concept of musubi was mentioned in the popular film Kimi no Na wa, Your Name. If you remember from the film, the main character Mitsuha is hiking up a mountain with her little sister and her grandmother who says, Musubi, a word with deep meaning. Tying a thread is musubi. Connecting people is musubi. The flow of time is musubi. All are the power of nature. The braided cords we make are the art of nature and represent the flow of time itself. They converge and take shape, twist, tangle, sometimes go back, unravel, and connect again. That's musubi. That's time. That's also musubi. Whether it's water, rice, or sake, when a person takes something in, it joins their soul. That too is musubi. With our Musubi curriculum and textbook series, our goal is to help you connect to and engage with Japan, its society and culture, communities, and people. Our textbook is split into two text packets, oral communication and reading and writing, also known as the OC textbook and the RW textbook. The reason for the split is that spoken Japanese and written Japanese are quite different, each with its own styles, practices, and characteristics, as well as study methods and strategies. As you move through 101 up to 202, you'll learn more and more about these differences. Let's start with the oral communication text packet. It begins with a pre-session section that introduces everyday greetings and expressions, as well as useful classroom expressions, and lastly, the number system. After that is a page introducing the textbook characters, including a little about them, so you can follow their conversations and interactions through each lesson. The textbook then has each of its 4 lessons, which each follows a set pattern. Each lesson begins with a list of can-do statements, objectives, and goals, which you'll be able to do by the end of the lesson. It also lists the situations, settings you'll find yourself in, and the specific tasks and activities you'll be engaging in. The rest of the lesson is a series of dialogues, each an example of talk on a small subtopic, which gradually add up to a full topic conversation. This means each day you'll work on part of a conversation, gradually building them up and weaving them together into a full conversation on a topic. For instance, lesson 1 is about introducing yourself, and each dialogue addresses a different aspect, such as opening greetings, where you're from, your class standing, your major, your hobbies, and closing expressions, so that by the end of the lesson, you can have a full, rich conversation introducing yourself. With each dialogue and subtopic, you'll have vocabulary, either vocab used in the dialogue or other vocab useful for different variations or personal touches. You'll also have core expressions commonly used in such situations, and related tips for conversation that highlight conversational practices explaining the social and cultural background behind them. After dialogues are practice exercises that practice basic interactional sequences, which incorporate new grammar, vocab, and phrases. After practices are activities, which are free, open conversations, a chance to try the subtopic, putting it all together, and trying out the conversation in a spontaneous way. At the end of each lesson is a fun language or culture note and a full vocabulary list. After all the OC textbook lessons are 2 additional text packets, grammar notes, along with grammar practice worksheets, and the appendices. They are added to the end of the OC text so that there are only 2 main textbooks to distribute, download, print, etc., but they are technically separate text packets. Let's go over each. The Grammar Notes text packet starts with a table of contents, which lists each grammar item and its page number for reference. Each grammar note has explanations as well as example sentences. In a lesson, each day for homework, you'll have a dialogue to study, preview, familiarize. And in most cases, those dialogues will have new grammar appearing in them. Meaning, every day or every other day, your homework will also include a grammar note to study, preview, familiarize as well. It is essential you read the grammar notes deeply before class on your own, as they are the core focus of the lesson tests and final exam. In class, the teacher may cover the grammar note, but will likely only do so in brief, as a quick review, to reinforce your self-study. So if you don't read the grammar notes beforehand, then in class you won't understand what's going on, won't be able to fully participate in the practices and activities, and thus won't get much out of each day's class. And ultimately, you'll likely do worse in the lesson tests and final exam. Japanese grammar is not something you can cram before a test. It requires thorough reading, contemplation, practice, application, and time. In sum, how well you read and think about the grammar notes before class will largely determine your overall course grade. The other text packet is the appendices, which is a very useful reference containing charts of common core conjugations for verbs, adjectives, certain grammar patterns, and useful counters for hours, minutes, days, etc., including irregularities. The other main text packet is for reading and writing, the RW textbook. With a similar lesson-by-lesson pattern, each starts with a list of can-do statements specific for reading and writing. The initial lesson introduces you to the Japanese writing system and hiragana, and the subsequent lesson focuses on katakana, and the final two lessons on kanji. As you learn each alphabet, you'll have practice and exercise sheets to reinforce your knowledge and use of the characters. After that, each lesson has several reading tasks and writing tasks to combine the lesson topic and your new reading-writing skills. Lastly, each lesson ends with a fun language or cultural note. In the final lesson, you'll work on a class album project, composing an essay about yourself, demonstrating what you've learned over the whole semester. In review, you have the oral communication textbook, with attached grammar notes and appendices, and the reading-writing textbook. To note, each text, OC, GN, appendices, and RW, each has its own page numbering, so be careful. For instance, there's OC page 10, and RW page 10, etc. If you get a hard copy by ordering through the MAPS printing office, or by printing on your own, we recommend getting a binder and using dividers between each text for easier reference. If you use the digital PDFs, we recommend taking the OC PDF and creating 2 additional copies of it. Then rename one copy Grammar Notes and delete all the other pages, and then rename the other copy Appendices and delete all the other pages. It's a small bit of work, but will make your daily study much easier, as you won't have to scroll all the way to the bottom and back and forth. You can simply open the relevant separate PDF. Under our new Musubi curriculum, we practice what is called a flipped classroom. Whereas in a traditional class, you first have an in-class lecture covering content, then out of class, do homework activities to apply the content. In a flipped class, you first, outside of class beforehand, cover the content on your own, then in class, review and do activities to apply the content and work with concepts, with the support of classmates and the teacher. What this means is, for our Japanese classes, you have to study in advance. If you don't, you won't know what's going on in class and will get very little, if anything, out of it. But in class, you'll get to practice a lot and do fun activities using the language. Overall, the flipped classroom in terms of learning is more effective, but does take more advanced time and effort on your part. We cover a lot of topics and details, but when you finish, you'll be far ahead of other programs and able to do a lot more. So now, for your Japanese class, let's specifically and concretely look at what to study and how to study it. We'll use Lesson 1 as an example. You'll likely have a lesson schedule that looks something like this. While each teacher may format their lesson schedule slightly differently, you'll have something to study preview, some Moodle online exercises, and some homework to turn in. Let's go through each part, starting with to study preview. Here, it says for the OC text packet, to study preview dialogue 1A on page 2. So, go to your OC text packet, and then go to page 2, and find the dialogue. But how should you study a dialogue? Here are our recommended steps for optimal learning. First, it's a conversation, so listen to it. The audio files will be accessible on Moodle. Listen through a couple times to get a sense of the rhythm and flow and how the words sound and connect. Second, read it straight through. This will help you put the words in your own mouth while keeping a natural pace and help with your reading speed and skills. Third, read through it again, but this time referring to and studying any and all vocabulary, core expressions, tips for conversation, and grammar notes. Fourth, when studying the grammar notes, Thoroughly read the title, pattern, description, and example sentences. As mentioned earlier, how well you read and think about the grammar notes before class will have a huge impact on your lesson tests, final exam, and course grade. In the vocabulary box for each dialogue, you'll notice vocab items which appeared in the dialogue itself, as well as vocab items with an asterisk, which are useful for the topic, whether it be different variations or personal touches. You need to study both types, in other words, all words in the box, as any are game for quizzes and tests. The To Study preview section also listed Grammar Note 1 on page 1. So, go to the Grammar Notes packet and find page 1. And as previously mentioned, make sure to thoroughly read the title, pattern, thinking about how you construct and structure it and how you conjugate it, any sub-patterns, structures, conjugations, and the description and explanation. Japanese grammar is very different from English grammar. You really need to take time to contemplate, think about, and grapple with the details, and put in the mental effort to grasp and understand the complexities and nuances. Lastly, make sure to read all the example sentences. After the abstract, generalized descriptions and explanations, these concrete examples will really help you to see how the grammar is used in sentences in a variety of ways. Once you've read through the grammar note, go back and listen to the audio file again. Having studied everything, it should not only be more comprehensible, but also more rich and colorful too. As a wrap-up to your study previewing, an option is to take a sneak peek at the practice and activities to see what you'll be getting into in class. After you're done with the study preview work of the dialogue and grammar note, you can move on to the Moodle online exercises, which are meant to reinforce the dialogue and grammar content through comprehension checks, vocab checks, or grammar practice. In this instance, we have Moodles 1 and 2 to do. So first, go to the Moodle page for your class. To note, the link to the OC Dialogue audio files is just below the homepage illustration. Otherwise, find the Moodle numbers you have to do, go into each one by one, and complete the exercise. You'll notice they're broken into sections. Within each section, on one day you may only do some, and then the next day go back and do the rest. While this means the order and numbering may jump around a bit, it's meant to break up the work to be more manageable and to reinforce the content by checking it over time. Now let's look at the To Study preview for the reading and writing textbook. We have sections 1 and 2, Japanese writing system, and hiragana, the first row of characters. Also note the homework you'll have to turn in will be HP, hiragana practice, 1, on that first row of characters. So, for the first part, we'll go to the RW text packet, section 1, and read pages 1 through 5. As study preview work, you're not trying to memorize and master everything. You're just reading to get familiar with the content, so that in class you can discuss, review, and work with it. You're just establishing a foundation, which you'll build on in class. For the second part, we'll go to section 2, page 6, and study the first row of 5 characters, A, I, U, E, and O. After that, for the homework, go to the HP1 worksheet on page 8 and practice writing the characters. Once finished, don't forget to bring your homework to class to submit. So, that's our Musubi textbooks, what to study, and how to study. On this slide are some general study tips and strategies for Japanese, as well as your other classes. There are several videos, the links for which are in the YouTube video description box, and some core concepts that are mentioned throughout the videos, things to keep in mind as you study. Welcome to Musubi. Ganbare!